There are secrets that no matter how hard we try to hide, one day they will be revealed. For a long time, I lived a life that no one suspected, in a warm and complete family. But there was a truth that I always carried with me, a part of myself that I tried to hide. But then he came into my life, and everything I thought I had control of suddenly fell apart. Emotions cannot be hidden forever, and when my family found out, everything I tried to cover up suddenly collapsed and my happy life was broken. This is my past, the story that I want to share today. My name is Joshua Wilson. Since I was a child, I always felt that I was different from everyone else. While other boys my age liked to play with toy cars, play soccer, and rough games, I preferred to spend time with girls, play with dolls, and play gentler games. But that was never accepted by my parents. They wanted me to be a real man, strong, assertive, and not weak or effeminate, as they called me. I have always struggled to live the way my parents expected. At home, I tried to hide my true self, to play the role of a good, strong boy to please them. I knew that if they saw me differently, if they knew the truth about my inner feelings, they would never accept me. But when I was out, away from the supervision of my family, I could truly be myself, comfortable with what I liked and felt. Life went on like that, peaceful but full of pretense. I always lived between two worlds. One was the person my parents wanted me to be. The other was the real me that I only dared to show when no one was looking. And so I was lost between two egos, wondering if I would ever dare to live true to myself. When I grew up and had a stable career, my parents started to pressure me about marriage. They always wanted me to quickly get married and settle down like other men. They didn't know that inside me, the struggle with my true self never stopped. I couldn't tell them things that they would never understand or accept. My parents often forced me to go on blind dates, arranged to meet suitable girls, hoping that I would find a woman to fix the differences that they always saw as wrong with me. I didn't want my parents to know my true self, didn't want to disappoint them or be judged harshly. So I reluctantly agreed to go on blind dates just to please them, knowing full well that this would never bring me true happiness. That day I met Emily Jamison. She was beautiful, charming, and completely fit the image my parents wanted for a daughter-in-law. The meeting was normal. We talked about work, life, but really I just felt empty inside. It wasn't that Emily wasn't attractive or interesting. It was that I knew this relationship didn't come from my true feelings. During the meeting, I tried to play the role of the man my parents wanted me to be. I said things that I thought would please Emily and make things go smoothly. But deep down, I couldn't stop thinking that I was hiding the truth that I couldn't love a woman the way people expected me to. After the blind date, my parents were very satisfied, but I once again was stuck between who I should be and who I really was. Emily, she deserved a man who loved her from the bottom of his heart, not someone who hid his true life just to please his family. Under constant pressure from my family, Emily and I started dating. Although I was always torn between my true self and the image my parents expected, I couldn't deny that Emily was a very beautiful, intelligent, and charming girl. She had a gentleness that made others feel comfortable, and no matter how different my personality was, I couldn't help but feel moved by her. We spent time together, went out to dinner, watched movies, and shared stories about life. Every time I was with Emily, I felt like I could forget about some of the conflict inside me, at least temporarily. Emily laughed and talked naturally, and gradually, those dates became a familiar part of my life. I felt the vibration in my heart, even though it was an emotion coming from another part of me, the part one had been trying to pretend to be for so long. Not long after that, with the witness of family and friends, we decided to get married. The wedding was held grandly. Everything was perfect according to my parents' standards. Everyone smiled brightly, sent congratulations and compliments to the happy couple. My parents looked extremely satisfied. They believed that I had finally become the man they had always wanted. But as I stood there, in my neat suit next to Emily, a strange fear invaded my mind. I wondered how much longer I could sustain this life. A life of someone I wasn't really, in a relationship that, despite the excitement, still felt like a deep connection was missing. But at that moment, everything seemed too perfect to stop. I chose to move on, hoping that perhaps one day I would find harmony between who I really was and what this married life required. Just a few days after the wedding ended, we moved out, starting a new life in a small but cozy house. Everything seemed perfect. Emily, with her gentleness and thoughtfulness, made me feel that I had chosen the right path. She always smiled, worried about me every little thing, and in those first days I realized that married life is not only about harmony between two people, but also about understanding and sharing. Every day I go to work and return home, where Emily greets me with loving eyes. The small house is filled with laughter and simple joys. Although my inner feelings are sometimes conflicted, I gradually learn to live with my new responsibility: a husband, a person that the family can rely on. We live in those happy days, without any worries or concerns. Our life as a couple passes gently, with small joys: every day dinner together in the evening, watching movies together, or simply sitting and chatting. I know, although there are still things in my heart that are difficult to say, Emily and this new life are helping me find some peace, at least for the moment. Not long after Emily announced the good news that she was pregnant, my emotions were mixed between happiness and anxiety, but her bright eyes and the joy of both parents made me tell myself to become the husband and father that everyone expected. We are preparing to welcome our first child with excitement and anticipation. The day our daughter was born, I couldn't hold back my tears. Looking at little Grace in my arms, I felt a connection deeper than I had ever felt before. At that moment, I promised myself that I would love and protect both mother and daughter with all my heart. Despite the many conflicts in my life, I decided to be the best husband and father for them, to give all my attention to make Emily and Grace happy. But life always seemed to like to joke with me. Even though I promised myself that I would love and protect Emily and my daughter with all my heart, fate brought me to meet James Smith, the man who made everything more complicated than ever. I first met James at a company event. He had just been hired as a business development manager, a position that was full of power and influence. We quickly struck up a conversation at his welcome party, and I couldn't help but be impressed by James's tall, strong appearance. He was handsome, muscular, and always exuded an attractive confidence. He was the type of person that everyone was immediately drawn to: single, successful, and seemingly lacking in everything. For the first few weeks, we were just colleagues, meeting each other in meetings or discussing work, but the relationship between James and I gradually became closer. We often worked together, discussed projects, and before I knew it, our work meetings gradually turned into after-hours conversations, even going out for coffee or lunch together. With his friendly appearance and easygoing personality, James quickly became a friend with whom I could share many things, from work to everyday stories. He was smart, funny, and always seemed to understand what I was thinking. That made me feel comfortable and open up more easily. However, not long after, I began to notice a change in the way he treated me. At first, it was just accidental touches of the hand, deep gazes when we talked. When we met, I felt that James's eyes were no longer just those of a friend, but seemed to contain something deeper. Sometimes I felt a little confused when he stood too close to me, or lightly touched my shoulder with a somewhat confusing smile. One time, after a stressful working day, we decided to go out for a beer to relax. That was an evening I could never forget. When we were sitting together, James looked at me for a long time, his eyes full of affection, as if he wanted to say something that I did not dare to think of. "Joshua, do you ever feel that life sometimes makes people have to hide many things?" His unexpected question made me pause. I sensed the hidden meaning in his words, in the way he looked at me, and suddenly my heart skipped a beat. From then on, I couldn't help but notice James's gestures. He seemed to intentionally pull me closer, not only in terms of work, but also in terms of emotions. Every time we met, his eyes contained something I couldn't deny, and that made me start to panic. I knew clearly that I had a wife and children and had promised to live my life for my family. But every time I faced James, the hidden emotions inside me arose stronger than ever. Every look, every gesture of his seemed to rekindle things I had tried to forget. James was no longer just a colleague or a friend, but his presence gradually became an undeniable part of my thoughts. As time went on, I found it harder and harder to control myself. Every time we met, I couldn't avoid James's deep gaze, as if he knew what was going on inside me. His light touches and hidden words made me waver, even though I tried to tell myself that I had to keep my promise to my family. But James brought up the deepest emotions that I had tried to hide, and that made me feel more and more lost. Every time I tried to stay away, James appeared, pulling me into an emotional spiral that I couldn't escape. I knew I was entering a dangerous area, but I couldn't stop my heart from beating. The things I had tried to suppress for so many years were becoming too much to bear, and I began to wonder if I could continue pretending much longer. I had promised myself to love and protect my family, but my feelings for James had left me more confused and conflicted than ever. Then came the day when my feelings exploded, crossing every moral boundary I had tried to maintain. It was a beautiful day when the company held a party to celebrate the success of a big project. Everyone was excited. The party atmosphere was filled with laughter, wine flowing, and endless stories. James and I sat next to each other all evening, laughing and talking. The drinks gradually made my mind become foggy, and all the defenses I had tried to build seemed to weaken. I could clearly feel James's eyes following me throughout the party, deep and meaningful. But I tried to ignore it, telling myself that I shouldn't do anything stupid. As the party wound down, people began to leave. The air slowly settled, leaving only a few people to hastily say goodbye to each other and head home. I said goodbye to my colleagues and headed for the door, still reeling from the alcohol and happy stories of the evening. But as soon as I touched the door, James suddenly grabbed my hand and squeezed it tightly. Joshua, his voice was quiet, but full of emotion. I turned around, our eyes meeting for a strange moment, and I realized something was about to happen. "I've wanted to tell you this for a long time," James continued, his eyes boring into me. "Ever since I first met you, I felt something special. I couldn't stop thinking about you, about how you made me feel. Different. I tried to suppress it, but every time I was with you, the feeling came back stronger." James's words seemed to unleash the emotions I'd been holding back. His words made my heart pound. I knew I shouldn't let them take over, but all my defenses seemed to give way. "I like you, Joshua, more than I can say," James whispered, his eyes shining with desire. In that moment, everything I'd been holding back for so long seemed to shatter. The restraint I'd told myself no longer existed. I couldn't contain myself any longer. I, who had long struggled with my feelings for James, was now completely caught up in the moment. I said nothing, just looked at James for a long time, then nodded. We left the company and entered a nearby hotel, where we were alone. The hotel room door closed, and nothing could stop the emotions that were burning between us. The boundaries I had set for so many years, the morals I had tried to maintain, now all disappeared in that moment. We spent the whole night together, emotions exploding without any limits to stop them. The long night passed in intimacy and passion, something I never thought I would experience. It was just the two of us in that hotel room, where all the taboos, all the morals I had kept blurred. James not only brought out the emotions I had hidden for so long, but also made me clearly feel the self I had always avoided. The next morning, as the early morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, I woke up with a start. In that moment, a feeling of shock and guilt overwhelmed me. I quickly reached for my phone and was shocked to see that I had missed many calls from Emily. She had been calling me all night, wondering why I hadn't come home. I quickly opened my phone, my heart filled with confusion, trying to figure out how to explain when I called her back. "Emily," I said in a trembling voice when she picked up. "I'm sorry. I stayed late to do some things after the party and my phone was on silent. I didn't realize you called. I heard Emily sigh on the other end of the line. She was worried but believed my explanation. I felt a heavy heart for lying to her, knowing that what I did last night had betrayed the trust of the wife I had promised to love and protect. After the call ended, I sat silently for a while, feeling the conflict in my heart. From that night on, there was a clear change between James and me. We were no longer just friends or colleagues, but had crossed another line of relationship that I could not openly admit and could not easily give up. James and I began to see each other more often, not only at work but also after work. The intimate conversations and meaningful glances had become familiar. I knew I was entering a dangerous area, but I couldn't stop myself. I loved Emily and always wanted to keep my family, but the relationship between me and James became deeper and deeper. Although I knew clearly the danger and sinfulness of it, the feelings inside forced me to not give up. Every time I tried to leave, I only craved to be closer to him. James didn't need to force me. Just with his eyes and gentle gestures, he pulled me back where my true feelings could not be denied. We had been secretly seeing each other for a long time. Every time I was with James, I called Emily, making excuses that I was busy with work and sometimes couldn't come home at night. I lied again and again, and gradually, my feelings for Emily were no longer the same as before. The closeness between us gradually faded, and I couldn't help but feel that she sensed something. I don't know when she started to suspect me, but Emily's eyes during our recent conversations seemed to contain a scrutiny that I couldn't explain. One day, after finishing work late, James and I decided to go out for a drink to relax. We were happy, holding hands naturally as we left the office, and I called Emily as usual, saying that I had to stay for overtime. My lie became more and more smooth, as if I was used to it. However, what I didn't know was that the truth was far beyond my imagination. Emily was not only suspicious, but in fact, she had been secretly following me for a long time. When James and I entered the hotel, as we usually did, I had no worries or thoughts other than my feelings for James. But this time, when things were at their peak, the hotel room door suddenly opened with a bang. The bong sound from the door rang out clearly, causing both of us to turn around in surprise. Emily stood before me, her eyes cold with pain and anger. No words were needed, because the truth was exposed. My world collapsed in that moment, and I knew that all my lies had finally been discovered in the worst possible way. Emily stood still. Her eyes were full of hurt and disappointment, but she said nothing. I saw tears rolling down her cheeks, each drop falling silently, but that hurt more than any reproach. She only looked at James and me for a moment, then turned and quickly left the room. I tried to call out, but I couldn't speak. It felt like everything was stuck in my throat. My heart was pounding, not because of fear, but because I knew that moment had changed everything. I stood still, my eyes watching Emily disappear through the door, and my mind was in chaos. In that moment, I realized that my life had changed completely. The lies, the secret meetings with James, it had all led to this. I had broken the family I had promised to protect. The life I had thought was peaceful and safe was now destroyed, beyond repair. I stood there, with an indescribable feeling of emptiness. James was by my side, but the bond between us now seemed meaningless. Everything was broken, and I didn't know how I would face the consequences. When I returned home, the atmosphere in the family had completely changed. Everyone knew the truth. Emily's parents sat there, their eyes cold and full of disappointment. They didn't need to say anything. Their heavy silence said it all. Emily sat in the corner of the room, her eyes red from crying. There was no tenderness or love that I had seen in her, only pain and overwhelming loss. She didn't look at me, just pushed a stack of papers toward me, divorce papers. I stood there, frozen, my hands shaking as I looked at it. Everything I had destroyed was now clearly visible before me. Emily had made up her mind, and I knew that no apology could repair the damage I had done. "Emily," I began, but she cut me off immediately, her voice tired but firm. "Don't say anything, Joshua. It's over." She looked at me for a moment, her eyes filled with deep disappointment. "You didn't just betray me, you broke our family, the trust I had in you." Her parents said nothing, just stood up and left the room, leaving me to face the inevitable. I had lost everything. Everything I had promised to protect: love, family, happiness was now in ruins of my own making. Guilt and emptiness overwhelmed me. I signed the divorce papers with trembling hands, knowing that any explanation or apology would be meaningless now. My life had changed forever, and there was no turning back. After signing the divorce papers, I knew that it was all over. The life I had tried to protect, the love I promised to keep with Emily, was now nothing more than ashes created by my own wrong decisions. The relationship with James, despite its emotional moments, could not be maintained. The pressure of betrayal, the pain of what I had done, and the overwhelming guilt made it impossible for me to continue living this lie. I decided to end all contact with James, no longer wanting to continue that life of contradiction and wrongdoing. Instead, I had to face the truth, the consequences of what I had caused. Emily, though heartbroken, was resolute and calm in her decision. She packed her things and left the home we had shared, taking with her all the pieces of the marriage I had destroyed. I knew there was no going back. Living in shame and guilt, I did not have the courage to face everyone: family, friends, those who believed in me and had placed their hopes in me. I felt like I had lost everything, from love, self-respect, to honor. Unable to continue living in the darkness of the past, I decided to leave, find another place, a strange city, where no one knew me, to start over. I did not know if I could truly find peace or make up for the mistakes I had made. But I knew that the first step was to leave everything that was associated with this breakdown and hope that one day I could face myself without the shame and deep regret that I have now. Through it all, I realized that our decisions always have consequences, and that lies, even in the short term, will lead to long-term destruction. The biggest lesson I learned is that you cannot run away from the truth. You cannot live two lives without hurting yourself and the people you love. The secret relationship with James not only destroyed my family's happiness, but also made me lose myself. I learned that being honest with my own feelings is important, but you have to know how to face it properly. Not daring to admit the truth from the beginning, not having the courage to find the best path for everyone, caused me to fall into a spiral of guilt with no way out. The value of trust and love in a relationship is extremely precious, and once it is broken, there is no way to get it back to the way it was before. Ultimately, what I have come to realize most profoundly is that you cannot live in a lie forever. The journey to forgiveness begins with facing your own mistakes, and perhaps the most difficult thing is learning to forgive yourself before hoping for forgiveness from others. This ending does not give me answers, and perhaps does not need a clear resolution. I only know that I must move on, continue to live with the consequences of what I have caused, and hope that one day I can forgive myself and find a way out of the darkness I have created.